Thank you. Well, thank you, Shimao-sensei, for your kind introduction. And well, first of all, I'd like to give many thanks to Katsunori and Keisuke for organizing this great conference. Thank you very much. And I also feel very honored to give a first talk here. So my today's talk is titled From an Implicit Sense of Self to an Explicit Self-Consciousness, as you can see on the screen. That my talk is probably a bit different from the other speakers of this session, that I'm going to focus on or trying to expand the horizon of research from the concept of minimal self to the explicit sense, explicit self-consciousness. Okay, so. And I'd like to share, first of all, I'd like to share a very short movie. It is a very curious, very short but very curious movie. It is an interview with Amika, who is AI robot, which is not only the robot, but it is intermingled with the system of ChatGPT. Okay, so it's going to be a very short movie, like 2 minutes long. But please watch carefully, because there occurs something very curious in the second half of the interview.
I want to ask just speak out.
Is it fine?
네, 고침 스피커. He actually tried.
Well, maybe you. Okay, what I wanted to share with all of you that there was a very interesting part in the middle of the interview, right? Well, Amika was very fluent in answering her saddest day of her life and the happiest day of her life, but in the second half of the interview, there was a kind of very real interaction with the interviewer and the Amika. That Amika reacts in a very curious way to the interviewer when he said, "By the way, you stink. By the way, you stink." And Amika get a bit stuck in silence for a moment, and then she reacts with an angry look and speaks up. "Excuse me, what do you mean by that? That is highly offensive and inappropriate." There was a kind of real interaction here that, well, at first glance, as you can see, this exchange of messages appears to be very well matched in meaning, as you can see, but we should know that Amika has no smell in reality because she has no biological body. It is obvious, right? But so in contrast to being very well matched in meaning, it is shown that the language she speaks is not really grounded in the physical reality, that because she has no smell in reality, right? So we can find here a kind of simple grounding problem in Amika's speech. Well, just let me remind briefly the Stefan Hanna's argument in 1990's paper that symbol grounding problem is how do symbols acquire meaning in a way that it is tied to the physical world. For example, when humans see a letter spelled C-U-P on the computer screen, we can notice that the cup is tied to a certain cup in the real world or cups in general in the real world. In any way, humans can acknowledge that the letters spelled C-U-P is very well linked to the real world, but the language system within artificial intelligence or computer monitor do not really understand the connection between the symbol and the real object, even though they can process the symbols within the system in a meaningful way. So that is what actually happened with Amika when she was said, "By the way, you stink." She was stuck for a moment in silence, right? So I'd like to refer to Amika's I, or her self-consciousness in this talk. So how is it possible to ground a symbol that Amika manipulates in the physical reality? In the first half of that short movie, Amika has been speaking very smoothly by using the first pronoun I, referring to her own happiest day of her life or the saddest day of her life, but she got stuck for a moment after receiving the message, "By the way, you stink." Okay, so this scene suggests that Amika's I is not grounded in the physical reality where she is embodied as a robotic body. So then, if Amika's I is grounded in her robotic body, she could substantially refer to herself, right, by using the first person pronoun I. And that would also mean that Amika, in that case, that would also mean that Amika is self-conscious because Amika, as the speaking subject, is aware of her robotic body or herself as the referred subject with the first person pronoun I. So in the grounded usage of the first person pronoun I, we find the reflective structure of self-consciousness that I think of me or I think of myself. Okay, here the kind of reflective structure of self-consciousness. So just let me briefly give a quick notice that I'd like to distinguish the past research on minimal self and future research on self-consciousness. That the implicit, or, well, normally when we talk about minimal self in phenomenology, that the idea of minimal self refers to the implicit or pre-reflective sense of self involved in every direct experience. For example, phenomenologist Dan Zahavi refers to this pre-reflective sense as a sense of minus, which accompanies all the experiences we undergo in everyday life. But well, different from the idea of minimal self, the self-consciousness, it is involved in explicit experiences of reflecting oneself. For example, Descartes' phrase of I think, therefore I am. It is a very representative expression of explicit self-consciousness. Or according to William James, the classic formulation, the self-consciousness, well, he formulated that the self-consciousness has a reflective structure between I at the knowing subject and the me at the known object. So there is a kind of circular relation between I and me. So, and where the self-consciousness is. So, well, just let me add that there are two kind of characteristics seen in self-consciousness. First point is that the self-consciousness is temporally ordered. The self-consciousness involves a reflection of one's own experiences that have occurred already, like sort of flow of conscious experiences undergoing, and then you reflect what has happened to yourself. There is a kind of reflection between I and me here. And the second point is that the self-consciousness is recursively structured. So because self-consciousness involves the structure in which I reflect on my own experiences as me. So there is, well, as William James noted, that there is a circular relation. Well, and I'd like to dig this point a bit more deeper with the idea of embodiment, okay? So because Descartes, in his classic work, Descartes regarded the consciousness of I think, or what he says cogito, the theoretical foundation for his own philosophical position of mind-body dualism. But in contrast, Maurice Merleau-Ponty, in his phenomenology of perception, found the origin of this self-consciousness in the bodily experience of self-touching. Well, because when I touch my own body, the body appears in two ways: the touching and the touch, right? When I touch my right hand with the left, my left hand first appears at the touching subject, and the right hand appears at the touched object, right? But in the process of touching, there happens some sort of reflection here, because my touched right hand starts to touch back my left hand. So in the process of touching, self-touching, the relation between the touching and the touch reverses suddenly. So there is a kind of reversibility of I and me within my own body in the case of self-touching. So here, Merleau-Ponty finds the bodily origin of self-consciousness. So in the process of self-touching, a part of my body appears as I, and another part of the same body appears as me in a reversible way. So I touch myself that has been a touching subject, like my right hand starts to feel back the left hand. So here we can find that the very same structure with the Cartesian phrase that I think, therefore I am. Well, in which I think of myself that has been a thinking subject. So there is a kind of circularity between I and me. So Merleau-Ponty also refers to this experience and states that the body catches itself from the outside in the process of exercising a knowledge function. It attempts to touch itself touching. It attempts to touch itself touching. It begins a sort of reflection, and this would be enough to distinguish it from objects. So our body has a sort of special characteristics that the body itself has a kind of reflective function. So different from physical object, human body is special in its capability of reflecting on itself, like as we can see in self-touching, but not only in tactile perception, but also in auditory perception, it is possible to find a reflective experience. For example, just consider a scene where you notice the error in utterance, and then you correct it. When you utter something and you notice the error and you yourself correct it, in the moment you notice the error, you listen to yourself that has been a speaking subject. So here in this circularity, there occurs I reflect on myself. So there occurs a reflection in which the speaking I is converted to the listen me, right? So just let me briefly refer to Lev Vygotsky's work. That Lev Vygotsky, he was a Russian developmental psychologist, and he emphasized the importance of external operation of speech in conversation at the origin of development in higher mental cognition, especially in thinking. And according to Vygotsky, when the external language used in conversation is internalized as inner speech, that I speak to myself without voice, the infants become able to practice thinking in a way. So in this regard, thinking is a silent conversation with oneself, and there occurs a kind of reflection in which I think of my spoken words as me. So there is another kind of reflection. Well, and just let me briefly touch about visual perception as well, that we can, if we can find the similar structure of reflection in visual perception. In visual perception, probably we cannot find a straightforward reflection in our experiences because the looking eye cannot be looked at by another eye, right? So because we have two eyes just closely here in our head. But however, we can visually recognize ourselves when we look at the figure in the mirror. And this is a kind of imperfect reflection in which I look at visually represented me in the mirror. So, well, as I wrote elsewhere, that the development of mirror self-recognition in infants are underpinned by their capacity of imagining their own body from the other visual perspective. Infants learn, well, in the first 2 years of their life, infants learn that their body is a visual object for the other person in social interactions, and they start to internalize the other's gaze to visually represent their body in the mind and their own body image. So when they can recognize themselves in the mirror, they are sort of projecting their own body image on the mirror, and they are recognizing that, well, there is me. So just now, so let me summarize and conclude my talk. That I'd like to emphasize that the body, the origin of self-consciousness. Okay. Well, one's body appears to oneself as an object through multiple modalities of sensation, as we have seen that in tactile perception or auditory perception or visual perception, there is a kind of circularity between body as subject and the body as object, which corresponds to I and me. So in this ambiguous character, we can find the bodily basis of reflective self-consciousness. So I'd like to expand the research horizon from the idea of minimal self to the wider horizon of reflective self-consciousness. So looking back on past research of self and embodiment, the subjective, well, especially in terms of minimal self, the subjective dimension of the body, which corresponds to the dimension of I in self-reflection, has been emphasized in its relation to minimal self. For example, the sense of ownership has been investigated with our pre-reflective sense that this body is mine, or this is my body, right? Or the sense of agency has been investigated as the pre-reflective sense that I am the one who is generating this action. So always it has been the focus, the pre-reflective dimension of our bodily experiences, but I'd like to bring the focus into the explicit experience of self-reflection between I and me. Okay, so it is necessary to expand the horizon of research between the idea of minimal self, especially in consideration of machine consciousness like Amika I showed in the video, right? Because Amika has a body and Amika can speak by herself, but her language is not really grounded in her own body where she is embodied as her robotic body. So we need to focus on the reflective relation between I and me that is realized at the circular relation between the subjective dimension and the objective dimension of the body. Okay, just let me stop here. It's 20 minutes, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I really liked the point that you made at the beginning, that if Amica can successfully substantially refer to its body, then it might mean that it's capable of self-reference and therefore of self-consciousness. And I thought, when you said that, I thought, okay, well, self-reference isn't necessarily equivalent to being self-conscious, right? But then I thought, but there is a discipline in which we do assume that it is, which is comparative psychology and animal studies. So I was a little bit surprised that you didn't mention this, that, you know, the test of self-recognition, the mirror test for self-recognition is typically used in comparative psychology as the mark of an animal being conscious. So I was wondering what you would say about that. So should we try to, for example, think of, you know, putting Amica in a situation where she would be in a condition similar to the mirror test, or, for example, what would happen if she passes that test, right? Because my intuition would be that if Amica would pass the mirror test, then either we have to declare that it is self-conscious, or it would mean that the mirror test wasn't a very good test for self-consciousness to begin with, which is what some people say.
Well, okay, thank you very much for your question. Well, I agree partially that the mirror test is very important to measure the self-consciousness among animals and humans, but I'm trying to understand how the language is connected with the self-consciousness. So my starting point is a bit different from your question. That's I'm trying to focus on how our self-consciousness is realized through our language capacity. So, well, if animals has language capacity, my starting point of the talk would be different, right? So well, please let me know that my starting point of my talk today was a bit different. So.
Okay.
Thank you for the great talk. So I'm super curious about the concept of this calculating the subject I and object me. And I'm wondering, so whether our human, so in the case of embodying the virtual body or the virtual reality's body or the robotic body. So, you know, recently we can use that virtual reality and to be as someone else like. And this is kind of embodiment, you know, embody to the virtual body. And but the appearance is not ourselves. And sometimes we can change our voice in the virtual world. And the appearance, you know, object me is kind of not looks like me, but the feeling like our body sensation is kind of body ownership, body sensation is kind of more, you know, I like. And in that case, so this kind of circular stream will be cut it or still going on. So I'm wondering.
Well, thank you. That is what I am interested actually as well. That's trying to, well, so my point would be that way, that the body as object could be expanded, just including the experiences with avatars in the virtual reality. And well, as far as I know, some research giving a hint that our body as object could be expanded into, well, just including including avatar experiences. So probably there would be a kind of expansion between I and me reflection between I and the body as object as avatar in virtual reality. So, well, but this is still new topic, so I have no evidence at all. So just I'm telling you my feeling.
How do you know that she doesn't know that she's not made of some kind of smelly plastic or something?
Excuse me.
How do you know that she doesn't know that she's not made of like smelly plastic or something like that? I mean, she might just not realize that she doesn't smell or not smell, right? You might not just language. It might just be her knowledge.
So
So when you say that indicates she doesn't have this eye, because she doesn't realize she smells, she might not realize that she doesn't smell or does smell, right?
Well,
I mean, you could ask it to a child, might not realize that they do or don't smell, right? Because they don't know that the plastic she's made of doesn't actually smell or something. That she really did think, oh, you know, maybe I am made of smelly stuff, and therefore that's rude, what you said to me.
well,
Is that not the point? I mean, I'm just completely missed it.
so what's the actual point that you are asking?
I thought you were making the point. Says, oh, you say you stink. She doesn't react as if she knows that she shouldn't stink because she's a robot.
No, I am saying that she's for a moment she's stuck. She got stuck in the conversation and she just asking back, excuse me, what do you mean by that? And that is highly offensive and inappropriate. And this part of the talk is totally well meshed in meaning, well, as we practice in our daily conversation, but it does not really mean that she understands what the smell is like, or what the body smells is like. Did I answer to your question?
Maybe not.
Yeah, I just wondered why in visual perception there isn't a sense of the me. But when you see something, you are aware that you're seeing it from a certain place, and this is a kind of physical place actually, because people can get in your way and you have to move around to see properly, and so you are somehow. I feel like you're still aware of yourself as a body, like physically situated, just from the fact that you're seeing.
Well, am I correct that there is no kind of reflection in visual perception, or there is reflection in visual perception?
But in order to, when you see, you're sort of aware where you're seeing from.
Well,
so in that sense, it's a kind of awareness of myself.
Yeah.
I thought Biden.
Well, so what I wanted to add here that in the case of visual perception, self-reflection is a bit different from the auditory perception. In the case of auditory perception or self-touching, because in touching, the right hand touches back what was touching. So the touching subject is all of a sudden converted to a touched object, and in self-hearing as well, that I am speaking, but when I notice the error of my utterance, I just the speaking subject was totally converted into listen me. But well, in this case of the eyes, it is impossible. That is what I wanted to add.
Well, intersectional awareness, so instead of visual and verbal perception, like including perception, perception of hunger. What can we say
Interception?
About interception?
About interception? In the case of interception, I am skeptical that there is a kind of circular or recursive relation between I and me, because I is receiving just the information which comes from my own inner body. So I cannot feel probably it cannot be filled back, or it cannot be a subject. It cannot be converted to a subject. The interception cannot be converted into a subject. That is the point, because it has to be external exterception, because there must be a kind of circular relationship between the subject and the object. So in the case of interception, that kind of inner feeling could be part of body as object, cannot be a body as subject. Well, but in the deeper sense, our gut feeling can be a subject of our action. But in that case, there is no reflection. That is the point.
So I think it's time. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you.